Good, good. Okay, that's a lot better. You know, when Marilla calls, I do everything I can to bust my butt to get there, because what she does is she attracts people who actually believe in the potential of their dreams. And that sounds so, trite when you say it, but you know the strength in that? Everything you use, if you got a purse, if you got a pair of glasses on, if you drove your car the other day, if you turned on your computer screen, every single thing we interact with on a daily basis is the product of somebody's dream. Someone thought about that. Someone innovated that. Someone said, what if we do it this way? Someone looked at something that exists and said, let's do it a different way. Someone thought, let's do it a different color. Let's make it accessible in a different way. And all of our lives get better that way. So when you're thinking about innovation and creating your own company or your own dream, what you are actually doing is adding to the creativity of the world. You're doing nothing less than shaping it. One of the most important things to me is that when you look at the world and you see what exists out there and you see all that creativity and you take on those examples and you say, I'm going to do something, whatever that dream is for yourself, you end up adding something creative to the world. And when you do that, you're shaping the world. And when you take the next step and you say, how am I shaping the world? Am I using sweat labor, or am I taking responsibility for doing it ethically? You're, again, shaping the world. Every single one of us has nothing less than that power to determine how ethical our world is going to be, how productive our world is going to be, and what our voices are going to be. And as there are a lot of women in this world, one of the most key things that I say every single time I come to one of Morella's events is I want you to think about your grandmother or an aunt or a mentor, some older woman in your life. And I want you to think about the things you take for granted that she could never do. Have you traveled? Have you had a bank account? Do you own property? These are things that were actually illegal for my grandmother a long time ago. That's not that far a time ago. What kind of responsibility are we taking it upon ourselves to use the privileges, human rights and civil rights, that we take for granted every single day? What are we doing to protect them for the next generation? When you see a little girl going by in her baby carriage, what am I doing today to make sure she gets to have what I stand on? And what are we doing that all the generations before us made possible? That's a heavy weight, but it's also an opportunity to be a creator in the world. It's an opportunity to actually lead. So when you're looking at your business, this is something powerful that I tell everybody when I have a chance to. Think about the fact that you are not just making decisions for yourself and how you're going to spend this and your bottom line. You're making decisions for how much food your employee gets to put on their table. And when you understand that capacity, you end up being part of the solution. And when you're part of the solution, you move from merely survival to leadership. And that is something not any person, everyday person, can do. That is something that you have the opportunity to step into and to become something even greater. That's the opportunity to shape culture, history, and civilization. That is the power behind owning a business. That is the power behind having an organization. That is the power behind leading a nonprofit. Today, I stand before you at 49 years old, having gone through my life with one step at a time. Like many of you, I take one little step thinking, okay, this is how I survive, this is how I react. But one of the most powerful things I learned is not to be reactive, but to be proactive. It's very easy to fall into being reactive to the world, because especially today's world, we have AI sitting, mimetic, and we end up, whoa. But if you can step out of being reactive and you end up determining the direction that you want to go, you get to set the tone. And when you set the tone, other people dance to it. That is how you determine leadership. And I can stand here saying that I have negotiated the first treaty in 300 years between Hopi and Navajo nations. I've helped bring together tribes that were at war 500 years with each other. I've also been able to bring together, and when I say I, it's actually a whole team. That's the other thing. I stand here and a resume looks important, but it's a whole bunch of people. And I really tell people I'm in the business of creating leaders, because everyone that I work with is a leader in their own right. And it's my job as the person at the top to be a quilt maker, to tie together other people's what they do, what they know, and to have the ability to know that they each know their part so much better than I do. What I do well is pulling them together and working together and making that larger vision happen. We've had $65 million worth of food that would have gone to landfills instead going into homeless shelters and food pantries. I can go on down the line. We got, 160 families out of the war zone into Sudan and to South Sudan where it's safe. And then because you have that old colonial mindset and you have people that say, oh, if your skin is too dark, you can't go into Egypt, but we can take you into Ethiopia. And now it's not realistic that philanthropy can help those kids, their grandkids. Now it's going to take a for-profit investment. Then it looks at, you look out at the thing and go, well, what's the missing component? Oh, they don't have refrigerated capacity. They're losing 65% of the money that they make because all the food rots. We bring in refrigerated capacity, that's 65% of sweat equity they regain. And that means if we buy the land, they can buy it back in 5 years and be the master of their own life, something they couldn't do before. These are things that everyday people can do. And that was actually a hybrid model. And that's what I really feel excited about, because when you look at the challenges in the world, the majority of the money is in private hands. It's not in nonprofits. It's not in countries' pockets. Really think about that. It's not in countries' pockets. It's in corporations. So if you want to actually be a mover and shaker, you have to become someone on a platform that moves corporations. That sounds intimidating, but it's not out of reach for any of you. And what that means is you become the master of your own universe. My father was CEO of 7-Eleven, and I remember being a little kid and coming in and seeing, he had all these papers, and I was looking at the stuff on, there were like little diagrams and colors, and of course, as a kid, that's what I was most attracted to. So I went over there, and I said, what's in here? And he's like, well, there's something that said 1 cent, 15 cents, there's something up here that said $25, and then the countries. I said, what is this? He said, well, I've been told by the shareholders that I need to produce something for $7.25. And being a kid, I just thought, well, why don't you just go to people asking for 15 cents, get them the pre-approved $7.50, and make everybody happy? And I just went on my little way. And my dad came up to me, and he said, well, thank you for reminding me what my real job in this world is. And I forgot all about that. And then when I was a teenager listening to my music, and I remember my dad coming in 1996, and he turned the music off, and he threw a book, The Lexus and the Olive Tree by Thomas Friedman. It was my introduction to globalization. And he said, anyone your age and younger should be required to read this, because this is the world you're going to inherit. What you do on one side of the world affects what happens on the other side of the world. Take responsibility and power for that, and you can move mountains. The other thing he did is he said, remember when you suggested that I do that? We did do that somewhere in South America. Don't ask me now. I can't remember what country it was. And he said, they have built schools. They have built clinics. They have built roads, and not a dime was charity. And the shareholders were happy. That is the power you have when you are in charge of your company. How do you want to uplift the world around you? Now, the next step behind that is understanding how do you amass that power. And that's why I really was very excited today to bring someone that I've been blessed to meet through a friend of mine, Clute Gormo. My other hat, my nonprofit is the Mimnesy Institute. My other hat is UTF Holdings, and we do social responsible investments to help the Sustainable Development Goals as outlined by the United Nations. And one of the things that Clute told me when we were coming to Lisbon is, you have to meet my friend Portia. She is doing something phenomenal. She's using AI to bring a family office. How many people here really understand what a family office is? Okay, we got 2 hands. So, you're impressive. A family office is when a family has accumulated a great deal of wealth, and they start thinking about something really powerful. They start thinking about the we. Not just who's alive today, but who might not even be born. And they start saying, let me navigate all the things I've just been sharing with you, strategy, but let me navigate for the whole family. And that's how you get families that become legendary, that become major movers and shakers. That's when you hear about the Andrew Carnegie, the Rockefeller. They created family offices. And that's why they have libraries and institutions and where they amass that wealth. And sometimes a family office actually does something even bigger. They change the trajectory of a nation because of what they invested, who they got behind. It's one of those quiet powers. And when people have worked so hard from nothing and create their first business, and they get that, then they start going, oh, I can go on vacation. Yeah, you can, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you took just a portion of what you would put over there and you put it instead as an investment toward what your family could do, the wealth of a whole, and everyone in that family starts putting a little portion in it, before you know it, you could have a massive amount of wealth, and that allows you to get into something. And I'll tell you something that no one ever said to me, but what I have observed having benefited from a family office. And some people may really argue with me on this, but I feel personally that if someone is asking you to put in less than $50,000 into something, your chances of getting your money back is actually more risky. When you start going 50 and higher, what you're paying more for is less risk. And that opportunity that's out there is almost designed to be out of reach for people who are just beginning to create their wealth. So the way you get past that system is rigged, is you work with your core family. That's how you go from just making it to middle class to creating a legacy. And the first time I've heard anyone come up with a system to try and help people that can't hire a whole team of experts to do that